I'm going to admit it, I envy my children, because although I had some fantastic stuff to watch when I was a kid, X-Men springs instantly to mind, SWAT Cats was another one, even the really random crap we had on like Gravedale High was really, really fantastic to watch. But my kids, they get to watch the Octonauts and enjoy it as a child. Doing children's science fiction and doing it right is a real fine art. And they've got it down with this programme. So the Octonauts is a children's television programme that started in 2011, and it is science fiction through and through, but it is cloaked really well. It is cloaked behind some really fantastic characters, a fantastic setting, and some really fantastic adventures. So Vicki, Wong and Michael C. Murphy wrote the programme as books in 2006, and they swiftly sort of got picked up by the BBC. The BBC made a series of it, which was on early in the mornings when my oldest child was a tiny baby. And I used to adore watching it with her. I'd get her out of her cot in the morning, I'd sit with her, we'd have a little bit of breakfast before I went to work, and we'd sit and watch the Octonauts. The BBC dropped it after a series, but one of the good things about the world we live in now is Netflix. And I'm not being funny, the other day I dropped an empty bag of crisps on the street and Netflix renewed it for another 5 seasons. So, you know, we're lucky in that sense. It's a show about some lovable creatures. A polar bear, an otter, an octopus, a cat, a penguin, a rabbit and a dachshund that live in a submarine vehicle called the Octopod. And they travel around all under the sea, and it is just peaceful exploration of our planet's waters and all of the oceans, and they go everywhere and they explore everything there. So you get tidal seas they'll visit, right, and then they'll go all the way down to the Marianas Trench and they have adventures there. It is the kind of television that you'd expect to find in the original series of Star Trek, and a lot of the time it's very Jerry Anderson-esque. Young Miss Izzy here, who's my oldest child, she's the baby that introduced me to it, and she is part of that really difficult age group and demographic to get right. She's a tween, and she adored the programme as a baby, and she adores it now as a tween, but she doesn't tell anybody, so we'll keep that a secret and won't let anybody know. Say hi, Izzy.
Hi.
It is also popular with the other brats Izzy has to share her house with. So she's got 2 younger brothers and a baby sister, and they've all had a phase of Octonauts mania, and it's not something that me and Mrs. Sci-fi have really gone over the top to encourage. They've just naturally sort of found it, or we've just sort of put it on for them in the background, and they've just gravitated towards it. It's got this kind of magic, really. It can grasp your attention as an adult and hold you easily, but for a child, it literally grabs them by the scruff of the neck and compels them to just be enthralled with it. It's truly magical storytelling. So your average episode of the Octonauts does follow a basic formula, and there'll be a call to action during one of their mundane adventures sort of thing, and the Octonauts will go in and they will save the day. But it's always imaginatively done, it's always lovingly done, and importantly as well, there's this very strong undercurrent of absolute science, and scientific accuracy is paramount during the production of this show. For instance, one of the adventures took place where they was pooling along in one of their gups, which is a smaller vehicle they utilise in the show, and they encounter a creature called a giant siphonophore. Now, I had never heard of a giant siphonophore. I had to go and look it up afterwards, after the fact. I ended up going to watch David Attenborough and his Blue Planet 2 documentary series, where they show an example of this. And this creature, you learn from just watching the Octonauts alone that it is one of the most bizarre and alien creatures that even the topmost science fiction writers would have trouble coming up with. It's 150 metres long, and it is a symbiotic life form, meaning that although it's 150 metres long, it's actually a collection of smaller creatures that interdepend on each other for survival. For instance, there's parts of it that are the tentacle creatures that can administer poison, and there's parts of it that are the brain, and parts of it that digest the food and everything. And you learn this in the space of 5 minutes of Octonauts adventuring. You also learn through the adventure they have with it, because after they've made friends with this creature, it gets caught in a current and starts getting blasted upwards towards the surface. These creatures can only exist in pressures of 460 bar, and the adventure and the way the Octonauts save the day in this instance is that they stop it from bursting, because as it's getting higher and higher in the sea, it's going to burst, and they save it. So, are absolutely adorable and lovable heroes. You'd think for a children's television programme that started being made in 2011, the characterisation wouldn't be that strong. I mean, there's certainly a lot of garbage for children to watch where the characters aren't that strong and they lack a lot of depth. But for instance, the leader of the crew is Captain Barnacles. Now, he's a polar bear, and he's fearless, he's brave, courageous beyond belief, and super strong. He lifts rocks off of things to save creatures, or he'll swim in amongst icebergs and help flip them for the orcas and things like that. But you find out as you watch it that this amazing character, he's actually got claustrophobia, and he lives on a submarine. It's really a lot of depth going on there. You then got his best friend on the crew, which is Quasi, and he's the crew's cryptozoologist. And what his sort of role within the show is to sort of say there's a legend of this three-headed snake creature that nicks things off of passing fish, and it's called this, that, or the other, and it's a monster. And like, you later find out that it's a mimic octopus, and then you go about learning about the mimic octopus, and it's truly amazing. Again, I went and looked it up on YouTube. It's an amazing creature, and they'll characterise these sort of guest creatures really well, and they'll be given so much depth and character that you're just compelled to watch them. I mean, for instance, this mimic octopus, it's got this kind of like thespian Shakespearean actor vibe going with it. You know, it really sort of acts over the top all the time. It's absolutely amazing. You've got Peso, who's the ship's doctor, and he's the veterinarian, and he can fix any animal. He's super quick to speak, but he's very nervous, and he's growing in his confidence. And you can tell in the future, in the world of the Octonauts, the universe they inhabit, one day he'll have his own octopod and be as fearless and brave as Barnacles. You've got Professor Inkling, who's an octopus, who's related somehow or another to every other octopus and squid they encounter. He's like cousin Irving, for instance, is a giant squid. And they'll do things with him, like the octopod was in jeopardy from a colossal squid one day, so he connects himself up to the controls and has a wrestling match with it. So I'm just editing this video together, and I've realised that Inkling is like my low-key, my favourite character. You don't tell my children that. And I realised looking at him, he's actually a Dumbo octopus. So the show's really full of just subtle little things like that everywhere. We've got Tweak, who makes all of the vehicles, all the little guts, which I'll delve into later on. She's the mechanic, she's a designer, she's a scientist, and she's inspirational to young ladies across the world. You've then got Shellington, the worst driver in the ocean. He's the ship's doctor of whatever they encounter. He provides the scientific explanation, the exposition, so to speak, for these creatures that they encounter. And he'll be able to tell them that actually, no, we can rescue this whale, but it's actually getting sunburned, so we need to go and get these clam creatures from over here to wipe all over it, because it'll give it a natural sunscreen. Then you've got Dashi. She's the ship's photographer. She doesn't really do much. She's the sort of sensible one of the crew. And they're all sort of tended to and looked after by these just bizarre creatures called the Vegemals. But they are absolutely adorable, and even though they don't speak a word of English, they just cheep and chirp and whatever like little aliens. They're totally understandable, and they're very heroic, very cheeky, and they save the day more than once. So I mentioned a moment ago about the gups. The gups are really important to the story as well. So on board the Octopod where they live, they've got a fleet of vehicles called the gups, and they now at this point run from the gup A to the gup Z, and they all fulfill different mission parameters, just like the Thunderbirds. So you've got like the gup C, which is the fastest gup, and that's Quasi's favourite, and it's designed to look like a tiger shark. And you've got the gup A, which is Barnacles is one that looks like a gigantic fish in the same vein as a terrorfish from Stingray. It actually looks like an anglerfish. It's got a big massive light on the front of it. There's a special gup ambulance. There's a super strong gup that can lift anything, and it is totally Thunderbirds in that essence. And let's face facts here, I'm not going to lie, and you ain't going to lie neither, yeah? Everybody in the world has a soft spot at least, or is a damn favourite of Thunderbird 4. I did mention a moment ago in detail about its scientific accuracy, but I do want to explore that a little bit more. It's got a team of marine biologists that are part of the production team of the show, and they make sure that they get every fact they give right, and they also make sure that the context given is correct as well. So the Octonauts will often have kind of ecological adventures as well. So there'll be adventures surrounding undersea volcanoes that explore the bottom of the Marianas Trench. I mean, for instance, in that episode, you get introduced to lots of creatures that are native to that part of the oceans, in particular the Yeti crab, which is just an amazing creature that, again, I'd never heard of until I watched this, and my children certainly hadn't. It's called a Yeti crab because it's covered in white hair, and what it does is it puts its claws over the exothermal vents and then just licks off all of the minerals. And it's also got a very special breed of bacteria in its stomach that helps it digest the poisonous minerals that it's absorbing. So they do go to great pains to keep it accurate, but at the same time they really make it just magical and really, really enthralling and engaging over the period of 15 to 20 minutes these episodes last for, which is no mean feat. What the show also does as well is, in a really clever and subtle way, there's never a true villain or a baddie in the way that we would have expected growing up from the programme. I mean, I mentioned the X-Men here. There was obviously all the Marvel villains to that. In SWAT Cats, again, I mentioned it was you had the mayor of the city that didn't like him, then you had some outright villains in it, and that helped tell the story. But the Octonauts does it totally different to that. It'll make the events of the story the villain, or you'll get a guest character and there'll be a miscommunication going on. So for instance, there's an episode where Peso loses his first aid box and it's been taken by a group of giant walruses. And again, with the characterisation they give to the walruses, they're all Liverpudlian. They're all the Beatles, but the Beatles weren't the walrus, were they? Or was they? Was they? Yeah, man, I'm not sure. But these walruses, they have the first aid kit and they won't give it back because we're learning about the dynamics of walrus culture as we're going here. And what we learn is the leader of the walrus colony isn't well, he's hurt his fin. And all of the other subordinate walruses are bringing in gifts. And they've brought him this clam. But this clam actually turns out to be the first aid kit. So the Octonauts negotiate their way in to see the king. The brilliant storytelling there. And Peso helps him and he fixes his injury for him using the first aid box. Really economic storytelling, full of education, full of subtext, and just absolutely fantastic. In short, we've got a masterfully crafted brilliantly written, expertly paced, scientifically accurate, entertaining program for children of all ages to enjoy, and I count myself among them. It will take you away from yourself for 20 minutes, and your inner child will be free for that time. It is geriatric, and that is me not even really touching on the humorous side of it. There are episodes of it that play like a sitcom. They're that funny, and it's all done very subtly. It's all done in a look of on a creature's face, a subtle line delivered by one of the characters, the characterization of one of the guest creatures. They bring in a colossal squid to it on one episode, and it is truly one of the most funniest episodes ever. They end up wrestling with it. It's brilliant. There's an episode where they get knocked up in the middle of the night, and they have to go and sort out an argument between some sponge creature, urchin creature, and a crab. And it turns out they've got a symbiotic relationship. The crab hunts for food, and the urchin sticks on its back and protects it from predators. But they don't get on with each other. They're like an old married couple arguing. It's just so funny. And in the end of it, by the way, after they've been reunited by the Octonauts, they start having to go together at the Octonauts in perfect sitcom-esque style. It's one of the most earnest and well-meaning television programs out there. I tweeted out before I started recording this that I think it's one of the best children's programs of the past 20 years, easily, and it is low-key one of the best science fiction programs. And I'm going to explain what I mean now. Teaching STEM subjects is crucial in our world. We live in a world where you can go and be who you want to be. I can get on a camera and play at being a YouTuber. You can go and become a software engineer, or you can go and become a photographer or an artist or an actor. You can even go and record OnlyFans content if you want. But we can't do all of this without people who know how to fix things, make things, mend things, and invent things and run things. And that is why STEM subjects are just so important in school and in society in general. And what television programs like the Octonauts do in just a fantastic way, in a brilliant way, is they introduce children to science. I mean, you may not watch it for the marine biology, but you certainly watch it to see what Tweak's doing with her guts and see what latest crazy ass invention she's got going on. But also it's important as well because it's teaching children about marine biology and about the fragility of the oceans and the ecosystem in which we inhabit. And it's teaching children that, you know what, these ain't just big dumb animals, they're sentient beings in their own right. It touches upon ecological issues in just the most perfect way. It's not obnoxious in it. There's a reason why in the UK we have plastic straws now for everything, because we are so dead against single-use plastics in the UK. And the reason for that is the argument has been made well for that. We've seen the damage that it's done to the oceans and we're horrified by it. And it's a message we can all get behind. And the Octonauts touches on that in such a perfect way and such a gentle way that it's just, I cannot recommend it enough. To sum up though, when I reflect upon the type of television that I was exposed to as a child, the levels of violence within those programs. Now, I'm not that type of parent. I don't really mind. I mean, it done me no harm watching stuff that wasn't age appropriate for me. I mean, they made a television series of RoboCop when I was a kid. And they also released toys and merchandise directly aimed at children as tie-ins to this sort of stuff. Octonauts does it differently. Octonauts will encourage dialogue above all else. It will encourage understanding, it encourages love, it encourages respect, importantly. And with that framework as a universal language, that's how it goes forward to tell stories. That's about it from British Sci-Fi, and for once I've covered a sort of British science fiction programme. I'm happy. I mean, yeah, it was made in Ireland, but it was the BBC, so yes, done something British for a change. Yes, I'm going to go and celebrate now with a glass of orange juice or a cup of tea. Right. That's about all.